welcome, KFBK audience, and welcome to our new studio live audience. KFBK Sacramento, KBEB HD2 Sacramento, and KFBK FM Pollock Pines. And we just finished. We just heard the debate. We also have our panel of experts here representing both sides of the political aisle. I'll get to the consensus of the panelists first, and then we're going to go to the audience, and Caitlin's going to help facilitate the audio for the group to get your thoughts and observation and analysis. I encourage you to kind of keep track of what it is you want to say, because it's going to take a minute or two. We may lose a thing or two. So, Doug Elmas, what do you think?
Well, I think Donald Trump will declare victory. I think he was smart not to be there, because had he been there, he would have had a target on his back. The reality is that he really wasn't even discussed tonight, and I think that's what you're going to hear a lot of analysts say. Ultimately, I have to go back to what I said a little earlier, which is I think Marco Rubio was the winner here, and probably a lot of people who may have come in supporting Ted Cruz have possibly shifted their alliances.
We've heard that here tonight with our live studio audience.
Yeah, no,
Roger?
and I would agree. I think with Marco Rubio did what he needed to do to sort of again elevate himself. Chris Christie performed actually very well towards the end of this thing as well. And like we said, the guys that were the losers here, Cruz didn't do as well as he should have, and I don't know what the heck that was at the end there with Ben Carson. I just kept thinking when he was doing the preamble to the Constitution, that what must be going through his head was, he was singing the song "We the People" just to make sure he got it all right. But that was just that was the weirdest thing I think I've ever seen in one of these debates.
Yeah, I think the group would very likely reach many of the same conclusions. And let's get some input from the audience here, the live audience, who, again, thank you very much. It looked to me as though everybody was intently listening and paying attention to this. I didn't see anybody looking bored or distracted. And Caitlin Lewis is going to come around and get some observations and thoughts from people. Get your thoughts.
Right. Actually, John, I'm going to head over to Stephen Harmer right now. You're an Army vet. You had a few views, pretty substantial views on some of the candidates. You said that you needed a commander-in-chief, and you had a substantial view on Ben Carson. Can you just tell us what you thought?
My idea was that Ben Carson has spent his entire life saving people. He has that type of mentality to go in, operate, and save the person, the child's life, in fact. And God bless him, he's a wonderful person. The Army's only made to do two things. That's break stuff and kill people. And because of that, I don't really think that Ben Carson would be that great of a president.
So is there a candidate that you had in mind? Is there someone, and if you could please stand, is there someone in particular that you liked?
I came in looking at Ted Cruz, and I think that he did a decent job tonight, but I'm leaving looking at Rubio.
And actually, John, that has been the sentiment from a lot of people in the crowd, that they've changed to Rubio. A few people actually were very impressed with him. I heard from a few people in the crowd, too, that Cruz was putting his foot in his mouth, that Bush was a bit of milquetoast. So anyone else have an opinion? And if you could please stand.
Well, Ben Carson has gotten a lot of criticism, both from the experts and from some in the audience, basically because he didn't sound like a glib, egotistical, normal politician. Everybody else on that podium is a professional politician, and it's the political class that has gotten our country into a whole bunch of troubles. And some of us think that the best way to get out of those troubles is to look for someone who has character and intellect and who isn't a member of the political class and of the people to choose from. Ben Carson is the only person who fits that bill.
Just an interesting observation, if I may, to kind of dovetail with what you said. You think about the people who are on that stage. They've all been elected to public office. They've had to get people's attention in order to do so. They have to reach to a group like this, to people across their district, across their state, whatever the case may be. This is a gentleman who, throughout his entire professional life, he's dealing with dire circumstances for children, and he's communicating with the parents of those children. So if you just kind of envision that conversation that he's having with a parent who's dealing with a child that has a brain tumor or a neurological injury that he's going to seek to address, he's going to perform surgery. He's spoken before about how he's removed half a brain from a patient. They recovered and have done very well. So throughout his professional life, people are leaning in to hang on his every word. And that is the diametric opposite of what politics is. So I think it gives him a decided disadvantage. And again, I think many of us share your level of fondness for Dr. Carson, but how does that apply to actually being the chief executive of our national government? Yeah, sure. Anybody for that matter.
Well, I don't want to monopolize the discussion, but the point is that he would govern in a different way. He would take the country in a different direction. He would do something different than any of those other people on that stage would do. And again, there's some of us who think that that's what our country needs at this time.
All right, thank you.
Oh, sure. But very quickly, John, when it comes to qualities, this one man in particular, Nathan, had a few attributes that he was looking for. You were telling them to me earlier. Can you just, let's just turn over here real quick. Can you just tell me what those qualities were?
And in the spirit of full disclosure, Nathan's a former student of mine, so I know he's very bright.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for this evening, too.
Pleasure.
I had 3 priorities. Actually, they were leadership, experience, and whatever priorities they were going to bring in when the first 4 years of office, versus electability. Each one of those characteristics was extremely important to me. I was kind of undecided when coming in. I thought Bush, even though he's milquetoast, he did come back pretty strong tonight. One of the things that I did point out to Caitlin was that Chris Christie looked right in the camera and made very good eye contact with everybody, saying specifically about supporting law enforcement and going after Hillary for some things that she did. To me, that was really important, and that brought sincerity.
Well said. Any other observations? Philip?
Oh.
Yeah, I thought Rubio did really well, stood out to me. We mentioned it here in discussion that he was going after the opposition, what I think is important. I remember previous debate, he talked about Hillary making trips between the courthouse and the White House, and he mentioned that tonight with Bernie Sanders and President of Sweden. So I think that's really focused to kind of have the prize in mind, which is the election in November. So Rubio stood out and impressed me.
Now, Philip, I know that you're a strong supporter, at least in terms of fondness and personal respect for Dr. Carson. How do you put that into context here, looking at the person who will ultimately earn your vote?
Yeah, I've been a Carson supporter for the last couple months, and I would say in the last few weeks it's shifted to Rubio, and that's because of electability is what it comes down to. And I see Rubio, he has passion. It's a different kind of passion than Trump has. Trump just has passion with loudness. I'm highest in the polls. Rubio seems like it's passion. I want to turn this country around for the right reasons. So.
And gentlemen, I think as the experts, you would agree that Dr. Carson, while he did not have a stellar performance tonight, this is clearly not his thing. He will be somebody that certainly the campaigns of Cruz and Rubio will be aggressively pursuing, and I suppose Trump as well.
Yeah, well, and I think that's exactly right. I think whenever the candidates sort of fall off, and especially somebody who is as well liked as Carson, but people may just not feel that he's sort of presidential material. They've still got he's still got a very large following, a lot of supporters, and that'll be valuable to some of the other campaigns.
Although this debate is a moment in time, it really does matter, though, because 1 in 4 Iowans have not made up their mind. And if you take this audience here as a microcosm of what is going on in Iowa, you'll find that there are a lot of shifting loyalties here. People who came in with the support just like you may have had for Ben Carson, but realize that electability is the key here. I mean, we're now at the point where the show is really getting to the point with who's going to be able to run against Hillary Clinton and who's going to win, not who we might like the most. And once again, I think that Marco Rubio comes out ahead.
Yeah, and if I could add real quickly, just when Marco Rubio and Cruz, for that matter as well, when you looked at sort of the whole setup of this debate, they really got hit with some pretty hard stuff. The 60 minutes type of take a look at this video so we can sort of play back your words for you and put you on the spot, is a very difficult thing. As a media consultant, we teach people that you want to know what the questions are before they're asked, and so preparing for that kind of thing is very, very difficult. Rubio handled himself very well on that and was able to sort of just sort of deflect it and answer the way he wanted to answer the question on immigration, on his flip-flops on immigration. So he handled it very well. So for me, that's the sign of somebody who's sort of starting to get his footing.
As a Democratic consultant, who is it you fear the most?
I don't fear any of these guys.
That's a hard line.
And honestly, we've had this conversation before. I had different views earlier on. Right now, I'm fairly confident of who's going to be in the White House in a year.
Okay.
And John, I actually talked to Don while the debate was going on, and you said you have something to respond to regarding immigration.
Yes, I believe that all of them were prudent in their responses, but Cruz was deceptive, and it was shown that he was deceptive. And to end on a positive point, I'm very proud to be a Republican because I see we have some choices, whereas the Democrats, they don't have any. Okay, thank you.
I suppose.
Touche.
I suppose I should ask Doug the same question. First of all, you've made reference to Hillary Clinton as the Democratic nominee. Do
Right.
you absolutely believe that's the case?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, I mean, she may not do well in Iowa, she may not do well in New Hampshire, but I will tell you, the rest of the country will certainly fall in place for Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders is an interesting character, and character is really how I would describe him, but I'm not sure that he is a real viable candidate. Candidly, I hope he's the nominee.
Right, that's my question.
But because I do think that Hillary Clinton has a lot of experience, a lot of sort of institutional support behind her. And once again, I just go back to what we've been discussing here this evening, which is who is best to run against Hillary Clinton. And we are now at that moment. It still may be Donald Trump. I mean, it is very, very likely that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. This is not the definitive moment for this election. Right. It is just a moment in time.
Yeah, and I have to say again, you can never look. I don't think if you would have asked anybody in this audience, would they have thought he had gotten this far? They probably would probably have a lot of folks say no. Same sort of thing. It's not the same thing as Schwarzenegger, but it's similar in that he's sort of in that outsider candidate. But you can't underestimate this guy. The numbers that he's putting up in a lot of these polls in these primary states, are unexpected. And he can basically say anything he wants. I think the other day he said, people would vote for me if I shot somebody. And he may be right.
I think there's an element of truth to that. Certainly not literally, nor do I believe he intended it literally. However, that seems to me more something that his supporters should be thinking seriously about. Anybody who I think is so blindly loyal to any candidate.
Well, it's astonishing, really, when you think that Donald Trump has never, ever voted in a Republican primary. I mean, it is sort of astonishing. I am not a Trump supporter. In fact, I had a very lengthy op-ed in the Sacramento Bee since I worked for Ronald Reagan, and so many people want to compare him to Ronald Reagan. Trust me, I know Ronald Reagan, and he is no Ronald Reagan. I do wish that absolutely. I do wish that we could resurrect Ronald Reagan because that would solve the biggest problem we have here with many of the candidates.
I think that's a very valid observation, but I do sense this fear that comes out as emotional, and I also see an element of anger, which is something I think is important to think about and analyze for people who are supportive of any candidate born out of a strong, profound element of anger. I want to tell you a little bit about it. We're going to take a break here in a moment or two, but when we come back, I got a couple of things. I want to talk about the motivation of anger as it comes to making decisions, as well as we've got, not everybody here is a member of the GOP, so I want to get some Democrat perspectives from the audience as well. So we are going to break very, very shortly here and take care of some other business, but we're coming right back with more conversation from you and the panel of experts. Thank you for being here. Thanks to the audience. Don't go away. More conversation coming up after this.
Oh, that's cool.
That's great. You guys look great.
Very good. Thanks, Kendall. Yeah, isn't that amazing?
That's pretty cool.
Kendall, is there a bumper, any kind of bumper music coming in?
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back, and for the radio audience, if you're just joining us, we are gathered live with a very lively group of people who have been in studio watching the debate and have a lot of opinions about it. We want to get their thoughts. Also want to get a little bit of commentary from the panel of experts, which includes Doug Elmetz and Roger Salazar. What do you, the whole Trump thing, and obviously it's a realistic part of this debate tonight, notwithstanding his absence. What do you think? How do you handicap that?
Well, I do believe that Donald Trump is going to declare victory. And one has to remember that although we are watching the Fox News Channel debate, there are millions of people that are watching Donald Trump on CNBC, CNN, MSNBC. They may not even have watched this debate. So I would just say that one can never underestimate Donald Trump, and I have done that repeatedly throughout this election, only to see the more sort of radical comments he makes, only to cause him to rise in the polls.
Yeah, and again, Doug's exactly right. We're watching Fox News in this debate. It's perfect showmanship. It's kind of like that showmanship that we talk about with Donald Trump. He goes ahead and he schedules a rally at the exact same time, brings out some of the folks like Huckabee and Santorum who dropped out, and has his own sort of sideshow. And people on CNN are watching that, MSNBC are watching that, so they're watching something completely different than these guys. But this did allow them to have a little bit more substance in their conversation, I think.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that the best thing that happened with this debate is that Donald Trump was not there, and it was much more substantive than any debate that's occurred up to this point.
Interesting anecdote. I did hear from observers from Iowa that there was an opportunity, there was an invitation for Rick Santorum to address the group at the Trump gathering. He elected to not do so from behind the podium that bore his name. And it was a little bit of a uncomfortable exchange, and he ultimately gave up. That is to say, Senator Santorum. So I want to check with Caitlin and see if we have anybody who has a perspective from the other side of the aisle, where obviously we have a very GOP sympathetic or GOP interested crowd. So
yeah, I feel kind of lonely up here sometimes.
That was the plan, Roger. You may or may not get out of here.
Well, don't feel lonely for too much longer, because I'm standing between two people who have told me that they are Democrats. We're going to start here with Nita first, though, who actually said that you might feel lonely a bit longer because she's not too pleased with the individuals who are the Democratic candidates. So could you just tell me your reaction to tonight's debate?
I think Rubio is the better candidate for the Republicans. Trump is too much of a bully, but you need a strong foreign policy, and I don't see the foreign countries listening to Hillary, who would be the strongest Democrat right now.
She's tougher than she looks.
She might be tougher, but will the men of the other countries, especially the Middle East, listen to her because she's a woman?
How do you feel about Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders? I don't know. He looks like a wild man with that rough he gets when he's frustrated. But I really don't know him enough to really judge him.
Okay.
But what I've heard hasn't really impressed me.
Okay. What about the fact that he is an avowed socialist? Is that a problem for you, or?
Yeah, we don't need socialism here.
Okay.
We've already had it for 7 years.
Okay.
So then moving on to our second Democrat, Chris here.
Yeah, I just want to say how much Ted Cruz reminds me of Richard Nixon, and also Rubio was really well prepared for his foreign policy stuff. It looks like he practiced and studied before, so I think that's why he impressed a lot of people. Like, he had specific plans too, which was nice.
Rubio was one of the few candidates who actually called out the Democratic candidates. He said that Sanders would be a great candidate for Sweden. What would you respond to that?
I think that's an interesting comment. Sweden is a monarchy, I think, so he was wrong on that one. And also, he would be a good candidate for the Republicans to run against, because I think Hillary's the best option to run against the Republicans.
So you are decidedly for Hillary at this point?
I'm still thinking about it. I'm not sure.
Hillary
exactly.
versus Sanders?
Yeah, between those two. I mean, there's the only two choices.
I'll ask the same question. What about the fact that he is, again, when you say this, it sounds like you're being pejorative, but he actually is an avowed socialist. Does that cause you concern?
I'm born and raised in California, which is practically socialist already, so I'm okay with it.
Well,
So
you know,
it's
the-
yeah,
the interesting thing for us as Democrats, is again, and you said he's an avowed socialist. He wasn't even a member of the Democratic Party until this last year. For folks who I argue with all the time, he said, well, he represents democratic values. Like, he's not even a Democrat. He just signed up this year. So, anyways,
It's so interesting because somebody compared Ted Cruz to Richard Nixon. Bernie Sanders reminds me of Larry David.
and vice versa.
I actually have had occasion to see some YouTube clips of Larry David. I got to say,
Unbelievable.
Dead on.
And he's actually hosting Saturday Night Live next
I
next
have
weekend.
no
I
clue
think.
what else he has done performance-wise, but he's got that one nailed. It looks like Caitlin's got another comment. Do you have somebody else that wants to opine? What? Do you have somebody that's ready to go?
Walking around right now,
Okay.
this gentleman right here is motioning to me.
Hi, my name is Bill, and I'm another Democrat. I think that that Hillary's the strongest candidate on the Democratic side, but listening to tonight's debate, I kind of like Bush and Kasich as far as people that I felt would reach across the aisle. The others came across as so angry at the Democrats that I don't think that you're going to get a lot of crossover, and I don't know what the middle's going to do. But for somebody like me, if I was looking at these guys, Bush actually, I feel, is very presidential, and that he would, work with the Democrats, and the others just indicated they want to tear down everything that they've done or tried to do in history and change it in a completely different direction, and maybe that's what people want to do, but I feel like I think the strongest candidate would maybe reach across, and they still may be able to beat Hillary also.
Let me just make an observation, get some thoughts, and I also have a specific question for you, Doug, that'll relate to this. But it's my feeling, and I've shared this on the air before, it's my estimation, my observation, that we've gotten in an environment where it's increasingly divisive, and I know that's what political campaigns are all about. But in this room, I sense very collegial people talking about different points of view. I don't see anybody giving anybody the mean stink eye as they express opinions that are contrary to their own. So I appreciate that. But it seems like let's be realistic. There is an absolute need to look at the best that each has to offer and perhaps build some kind of a collaborative effort out of that. And I know, Doug, you worked in the Reagan White House. And I think for the Republicans in the room, maybe even some of the Democrats, President Reagan is an icon and is perceived, in my estimation, as one of the best two presidents of the United States. But he and Tip O'Neill, who shared no political commonality, were able to be collegial, and as I understand it, you probably witnessed it firsthand, actually after 5 o'clock, we're friendly.
Absolutely, and that's what I think we're missing here with many of the candidates on both sides of the aisle, is that collegiality. But I also think the country has changed, and largely from 7.5 years of Barack Obama, there is a lot of pent-up anxiety and anger amongst Republicans in particular. I would say, though, as you look at these candidates that are running for president, many of them aren't actually running for president. They may be running for vice president. They may be running for cabinet posts.
Or a book deal.
Yeah, or a book deal. Exactly. Some of them have book deals going on right now. So, I mean, they're in it for a lot of different reasons. But just going back to the point that you made, I do miss Ronald Reagan, and I wish that and many times I've said, I'm not sure if Ronald Reagan was running for president today, he could be as successful given the vitriol of what's going on in America right now.
Yeah, and Doug worked in the Reagan White House. I worked in the Clinton White House. And one of the things that you see, when you're out of the campaign season, when you're sort of in that governance mode, is that all of a sudden politics becomes all about the art of getting things done, because that's the only sort of way you can sort of remain there. Is like you got to have a sort of a big list of accomplishments, and that only happens especially when you have a divided government. That by working with the other side and trying to have some commonality, and you hear some of the commonality in some of the comments that you hear from the candidates themselves here tonight. For example, listening to Rand Paul talk about criminal justice reform. That sounded just like Jerry Brown's idea.
Yeah, but he's wrong about that, by the way.
I'm just telling you, but that's what it sounded like. So
Rand Paul is so much of a libertarian that he's almost a Democrat. I mean, he's almost gone full circle.
Well, it's interesting because back when I kind of handicapped him as being somebody very formidable in this election cycle, because I saw him as a guy who was inclined to go to the campuses and reach out with the students. He was inclined to reach into the minority groups, and of course the libertarian ideology, I think, is kind of something that's welcome among the millennials.
Well,
so.
That's the beauty of politics, though, which is it's all so unpredictable. I mean, how many times have we all said, Donald Trump's finished, only to find that not to be the case? You see candidates like Ben Carson, who was at the pinnacle, only to make a just huge nosedive. So that's presidential politics, and it is
actually Ben Carson and Carly Fiorina both had some traction for a while.
Well, we always say that that a month is a lifetime in politics. So you're looking at every week by week. That's a quarter of your life that goes through. A year's an eternity. So everything changes, and you're right, exactly right. When this thing first came out, we were so surprised to see Ben Carson leading in the polls right off the bat. But everything shifts and changes. And I think we're going to have more shifts even in the next week.
Absolutely. I don't want to point out anybody's errors, but after the first debate, I asked my friend Roger who absolutely lost, who's done, and if I remember correctly, it was Dr. Ben Carson. And then right after that, he spiked. I think Carson and Trump share one commonality. Their debate performance seems to have little to do with how they're perceived. I think Carson's drop has come not from debate performance so much because he didn't have the strongest debate performance up front. Nonetheless, he continued to climb. I think it's other things that have come up, and frankly, some things have been mischaracterized about him. But Caitlin, you've got somebody that wants to share enough.
I do, yeah. Christian, if you could stand. So talking about the point of the candidates being collegial, if you could just turn this way very quickly. You had something to say?
Right. I think the audience was collegial because I think everybody has a perception of Republicans as really, I'm a Republican, and I don't fit the stereotype of what you perceive a Republican will be, but I think Republicans are more segmented ideologically, and I think there's levels of conservatism that a lot of people are touching. Trump is kind of touching into the economical and more kind of solution negotiating style of a Republican that I think is kind of needed because of the last 7 years of the same kind of governing style that Barack Obama did. But I think it's like a counter. It's like a reaction. So I think that's why it's really feeling like that.
I just have to say one thing. You're exactly right. I would never peg you as a Republican. And
I have that hat.
earlier, I said to John McGinniss after I heard you speaking, I said, that guy is a smart political mind.
Thanks.
And I mean that in all sincerity. You're very articulate. You really are able to crystallize some really big issues into some real something that I can understand.
I was hoping they would talk more about the economy, but because that's kind of over the last month has been what's been on top of my mind, with how the stock markets and everything is reacting. And I think by the time we get to the elections, that's going to be the main topic.
And that affects so much because it affects our ability to be a strong superpower. It affects people's ability to pursue their life dreams. It affects the ability to deliver services to a community. It affects education, opportunity across the board. So it's a gigantic issue. I want to ask the group, if you think about this for a minute, if you have a candidate that you're very strongly leaning toward, if you heard them say something legitimately kind, not just pandering, but legitimately kind about an idea from one of their opponents, would that cause you to see have a diminished assessment of them? Because it seems to me that they're deathly afraid to say that.
He's shaking his head. We're going to go to this gentleman. What's your name?
Steve Lee.
Okay.
Well, John, face this way. My background's been in law enforcement, and I've since moved into investments in small business. And I know I'm a big Trump fan. I've talked to other law enforcement officers. The security of this country right now is at risk, and he seems to be the only one that's come forward with some really good ideas on how we can change that. I think he's sparked off. He's gotten the other candidates to finally talk about it. And, you know, Trump's the type of guy that I don't think, you know, he comes off as he's a, you know, a lot of people say he's a bully, he knows everything. But somebody like Donald Trump, though, knows to go out and get the best people and surround himself like that. So if he gets other ideas from people, absolutely, I think he's going to embrace them.
That's a very interesting perspective. And my sense right now is that he's going to be very difficult to beat. I don't know if the experts agree. We are about to take another quick break here, and we're going to have some conversation amongst ourselves in the meantime. And I have a couple more questions for the audience as well as from the panel of experts. But be thinking about maybe cabinet members. Who do you see out of this group, if anybody, that you'd like to see placed perhaps somewhere other than the Oval Office, but in a position where they could have a very profound effect? Now we have Ted Cruz supporters here. I wonder about a guy who's brilliant, has a great legal mind, but not lovable. May that be a good justice on the Supreme Court? We'll talk about that much more right after this. Don't go away.
Don't scare me.
You know, I will say.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, and I've got that the Ted Cruz audio.
Second was Cruz with 16% of the conversation and 13% for Rubio. So we don't know if it's positive or negative, so I can't really tell you that. But just kind of the tweets that I saw, people thought Cruz came off as really petty based off of how he handled the moderators and like you guys in the rest of the town hall, Rubio came off really well for people. And then I also just want to mention that Carson, even though people really did not respond to him very well, they thought he came off not very smart, actually. Like, he was thinking too hard. Like, he was trying to recall all the foreign policy he just studied yesterday. That was a lot of the consensus among Twitter people. But they really responded to his comment on political correctness. He said, we need to stop allowing political correctness to dictate our policies because it's going to kill us. That was one of the most retweeted phrases. So obviously that's something that people are responding to, and I think that that's a big reason why Trump is still dominating.
Very interesting stuff because, of course, he is the king of denial of political correctness. But I'm always fascinated when people opine that a brain surgeon, which is kind of the gauge we use to describe those complex tasks that we all, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out the fact that this guy is pretty bright. Nonetheless, because his background, his brilliance lies in another area, it's not as perceptible, I believe. But I ask the question, and I'll ask the audience as well as the panel of experts, who do you see as potential, maybe there's a running mate on this stage if in fact it does go to Trump? Certainly wouldn't be a running mate if for the Democratic Party side. But what about cabinet members? Do you see a justice on the Supreme Court in that group? Do you see an attorney general in that group? Do you see a surgeon general? There's only one I think would be qualified for that. That would be Governor Kasich, of course. But anybody else? Do you see commerce, state, any other cabinet level positions that may jump out from that group?
Don't forget that Rand Paul is also a eye surgeon, right?
A good point. You're right. You're right.
So
Sort of like the blind leading the blind.
Exactly.
Sorry, didn't mean to make a spectacle of myself.
To sort of bridge that,
Doug will be performing later.
Yes, exactly.
Please tip your waitresses. To sort of bridge those things, John, you had the comment earlier, but with Cruz, trying to say that everybody was attacking him, and I think for he's the one guy up there that I would see that would not be a cabinet member or would not be appointed just because, he's so unlikable, and he rubs the others the wrong way, that just wouldn't be able to sort of tolerate him, I think.
Can I just sort of address that? Getting back to the social media where Heather, is that right? Said that many of the people thought that he was petty. What he did tonight was reinforce what Donald Trump has been now saying for the last couple of weeks, which is that he's a mean guy. How many times have we heard Donald Trump say, Ted Cruz is a mean guy? And what Ted Cruz did tonight was reaffirm exactly what Donald Trump has said. So Donald Trump, once again, is controlling the message that is going on in a debate that he's not even at. It is fascinating to watch.
Yeah. It is extraordinarily interesting to see the impact he's had on this. I'll say, though, I think it's agreed by people who have studied Mr. Cruz, those who have known him. The guy has argued before the U.S. Supreme Court 9 times. That is a person who possesses a very keen legal mind. And you don't have to be lovable to be an effective justice. In fact,
you do have to be lovable to be president of the United States.
Absolutely true.
And I think that there are a lot of people who look at Donald Trump and say he's a mean guy, but there are a lot of people who think he's a lovable guy too. It's an interesting sort of dichotomy when one looks at a character like him.
Let me just, not necessarily for outspoken response, but if you think back throughout the course of your life, if you want to jump in, fine. But as you look back on areas perhaps where you've regretted a decision you've made, how often was anger an underlying motivation for the decision you made? Now, when I'm not doing radio, I spend a lot of time doing litigation consulting. And when I see cases in which the defendant in a civil action made a decision based upon anger, those are very, very, very difficult cases to win. Very difficult cases to win. So one of the things that concerns me as we look at the electorate in this particular cycle, are we motivated at this juncture by anger? Because people are fed up, they're concerned, they're scared, they're worried about, I think they're scared about their safety, they're worried about the economy, they're worried about the future, and the combination of all that, because they believe they put people in office to make things better, and that hasn't been done, so the net result is anger. How does anger affect us in terms of making good decisions? Sir.
I think it's not really so much anger, it's aggravation and disappointment that people have, and maybe it might turn into a sort of anger, but it's not the kind of anger that you make a rash decision.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, again, that we talked about this a little bit earlier, but some of the analytics that were coming out from social media showed that the majority of the Republicans who were watching this debate, asked sort of how they were feeling about what they were watching, was angry. And I can't tell based on sort of what that graphic showed whether it was anger in general or anger at the candidates or what it was, but that's a strong sentiment that was coming across in social media.
I get the feeling it's anger at the status quo, and frankly, I think it cuts both ways. I see anger on the GOP side. I also see some anger on the Democratic side, and I think a lot of that anger comes from.
I hear it all the time.
That's what fuels, I think, Bernie Sanders, and the experts seem to believe he's got no chance of being the nominee. I don't know. I don't know that I'm so certain that Hillary's going to be the nominee either, though, for reasons outside electoral choice.
It is fascinating, though, when you think that we've now had 7.5 years of Barack Obama as president. There is this pent-up anger on both sides of the aisle. And had he been the savior, had he been a president that everybody felt comfortable with, I don't think you would see this venom that it spews from the mouth of many of these Republicans. Although Barack Obama was not, front and center in many of the debate answers tonight, he is what is behind the veil here. And one can't forget that. And Roger, how do you feel about that?
I think that look, you hear it from progressives on the Democratic side who don't feel, it's what you hear from the Republicans that that he's way too liberal and he's almost a communist, and then you hear from
I don't know that I heard the almost.
Exactly, and then you hear from the progressives in the Democratic Party who they feel that he betrayed them and didn't go far enough. So you get that and unfortunately it's all the rest of us who are sort of in that middle area,
right.
who are you have to sort of listen to both sides of this.
Caitlin.
Well, just weighing in from the audience when it comes to that feeling of anger, we have Doug Meek here.
Yeah, it's frustration more than anger because for the last 7 years we've been lied to, promising a lot, but obviously not getting that. And I look at like comparing government to a corporate business. If some of the things that have been passed and put through legislation or signed into law with the regret of people, where the majority of the people are against it, it still gets put into law. Compare a CEO in a major corporation, they'd be fired or thrown in jail for some of the things that are happening in our government today. And
Actually,
I don't agree with that.
You can compare a CEO in a major corporation, or you can compare, for the most part, a local government official, an appointed authority or elected authority who has comported themselves in such a ways we've seen from the federal government. And I'm going all the way back to, Clinton Lewinsky. That would not be tolerated anywhere. The local city manager, the school superintendent, certainly a corporate CEO, that absolutely would not have maintained their position after that kind of a scandal, which is beyond question as to what took place.
I don't know. Trump's still the head of his company.
Well, I don't think to the best of my knowledge, that doesn't exist. Maybe. I mean, we don't have evidence of it, but I won't remind you the nature of the evidence that exists in the Clinton Lewinsky's case.
So when you talk about anger, one of the things I look in the cycle is there's several different components you can actually break down anger with. Number one is a trigger. And I do see over the past 7 years there's a lot of triggers that are cycling and pushing the cycle of anger. Another one is internal reactions, which will drive someone to make a rash decision or look at only specific facts. There's intensification, which we've seen obviously with San Bernardino. External breaks, explosive peaks, which I think has definitely been around. Exhaustion and withdrawal, which means I'll just find someone come out with some leadership. And remorse. I'm not seeing a lot of remorse. I'm still seeing us stay in the survival mode. As long as we still stay in the survival mode, I believe some of those facts are not going to come out to make the wisest decision for the person.
Thank you, Nate. Okay, I think you have one behind you there. And as you're getting ready to respond, I just want to throw this question out, too, for after he finishes. Right after San Bernardino, I think there was a palpable element of, I'll go so far as to call it fear. It went beyond concern. In fact, I remember being out at different locations here in this area and in Southern California shortly after that, and seeing people out going about their business, visiting, dining at outside facilities, at restaurants, and just living a normal life, but everybody having a kind of an appearance that they're concerned about what may happen. There's a greater sense of awareness. I personally know many, many, many more people who are carrying firearms now for self-protection than before that. But that's been, 2 months now? And it seems as though in the masses, that fear, that sense of urgency and concern has dissipated enormously. I wonder what happened. I'll give you an opportunity to think about that. and then get your thoughts as to if we have another event, will that change the dynamics of the contest?
Along with the anger of this election cycle, could you call it anti-establishment anger? I mean, we're electing all of these officials and yet nothing changes, and then we do this and nothing changes. You know, this vote, if you look at the people really doing the best, Trump obviously doing the best for the GOP. Cruz is the outsider in his own party. You know, nobody seems to like him. Carson, you know, is loved by, I can't tell you one person who doesn't actually like Carson. You know, on the undercard, Fiorina, everybody keeps talking about how she should be bumped up to the main stage, you know, because she has good ideas. It's just not getting out there. But this next election cycle is going to be anti-establishment.
I think you're right, and whether it's anger or frustration or maybe somewhere between those two, and I'm not quite sure how to differentiate.
Yeah, you see it on the other side as well. I mean, that's all Sanders is very much. A lot of his appeal is on the anti-establishment side.
One of the most famous lines of any debate was a line that Ronald Reagan had when he said, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" And I guess I would ask this audience and the people that are listening, are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
About 7 years ago.
And
7
now
and a half
7
years
years ago. And the question is,
I am.
and so am I. But that's because we're in politics.
we need to take one more break, one final break, but we're going to continue the conversation after this. Again, I want to thank you very, very much. This has been a great group to have in here. Very, very much appreciate the collegial attitude, the politeness, and I want to acknowledge Caitlin Lewis and her good work tonight. And all the staff here at KFBK has been phenomenal. And Doug, thank you for being here. As much as it begrudges me, Roger, thank you for being here. We're going to continue the conversation after this. Thank you so much. With a question I think it was a bit of a theoretical question from Doug Elmas, but we have somebody who wants to respond. Are you better off today than you were 7 years ago?
Right, John, that was the question. And Jennifer, who says that she prefers Ted Cruz, from the pool of candidates that we heard from today, said that no, we're not.
Definitely not. Before, we could afford our own health insurance, and now last year our health insurance was $1,800 a month. Who ever would think of paying $1,800 a month? My husband's a tradesman and he's an independent contractor. His prices now that he can charge customers are lower than they were 10 years ago. And yet, of course, his expenses are much higher. And we're just barely making it.
So then what is it about Ted Cruz that makes you think you'll be better off with him as president?
Well, first of all, freeing up the economy. He believes in freedom. He believes in the Constitution. And their policies are what establishes or takes away our freedom. And it's the freedom that has made this country strong and prosperous. And we're losing the freedom. And that's what I think is causing the anger or the angst or frustration, is we're losing freedom. I mean, everything, health insurance, we're not free to buy our whatever health insurance we want to anymore. Education, we're even, freedom just to walk the streets because of, the open borders. There's so much freedom that's being lost.
And I'll throw it back to you guys as I move over to another gentleman who says that's the absolutely wrong question to ask.
All right, and as you work your way there, we're going to hear from Bill. You ready?
Short walk.
That was quick.
Yeah, I think that what we're facing is problems from globalization, and this is bringing the terrorism to our doorstep. And we can't expect the economy to just be able to grow forever exponentially, and we have to pay the piper. We're up against climate problems with our planet, and I think these are issues that I don't see the Republicans wanting to face up to, and I'm very worried about them. I think that we've got some serious problems to face globally before we can worry about actually improving our lot here in the United States.
And by the way, he is a Democrat, and he says his preferred candidate is Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just ask that, and Don, we'll get Caitlin's going to work her way to you, but as she does so, would it be safe to say that the majority of the people in this room believe that free enterprise is the best path to economic growth and prosperity? Is that, everybody see it pretty much that way? So would it be safe to say then, as you look at the candidates, you're looking for the person who will actually create the most efficient path to the greatest likelihood of economic prosperity through economic freedom, free trade? I think that's huge, because it does lend itself to so many other things about which we have concerns. So picking the best person to facilitate that, I think, is an important process. Don.
Thank you. In response, I've been agitated the last 7 years, and let me tell you some of the reasons. And they're factual. I didn't make them up between my ears. They came to me from our president. I have 2 sons in law enforcement. They do not have the respect they did before this person had taken office, and it's because of his verbiage that comes out of his mouth before he knows the facts. And anyone were to do that, it would agitate me. And so we have law enforcement on a lower level and less respect than before he became president, because of his big mouth and not much going on between his ears. Secondly, yeah. And secondly, what he's done to the races, all by himself. He assumes things. See, he's half white, but he doesn't discuss that. It doesn't make any difference anyway, but he makes that an issue. And then the way he's treated Netanyahu, a person for whom I have the highest respect. And I really believe, and it's not factual, but that our president is jealous of that man because he's brilliant. And so all those things have agitated me. And every time I hear him say something, I don't believe him anymore, number one. Number two, I think he is the antithesis of brilliance. I can put it that way. I want to be tactful. So I've been agitated, and I can't wait till he leaves and takes Hillary with him. And this guy named Bernie, if he can find his way out, But I've been agitated, and I think you can probably perceive it. But thank you.
Thank you, Don. Let me ask this question. We got round of applause. That's fine. That's what a live studio audience is all about. What do you think? How would you assess the panel tonight in terms of those coordinating the debates and the debate and asking the questions? How do you think they did? Did anybody think Megyn Kelly was out of line, drew blood from any of the candidates? Did you think they were good? Think the questions were good? Anybody have any quarrel or beef?
Her opening statement.
Yes. Yeah.
Chris Wallace was arguing with a lot of candidates more than Megyn Kelly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think probably a more important question is, what do y'all think of us as the panelists?
I don't want to know.
There we go. I mean, that's what.
Maybe best answered when we're not here.
I did think it was kind of interesting that Donald Trump did manage to do something that nobody had ever done, which is make Democrats sort of side with Megyn Kelly on this thing. That had never happened before.
Well, I've heard people say a lot of things about Megyn Kelly. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody else say that she's stupid. I don't,
No,
and
not at
frankly,
all.
I don't believe that to be true. And I've met her, and I can't say I know her well.
As Donald Trump said, who'd ever heard of Megyn Kelly until I made her the issue? I mean, so of course he's going to take credit for making Megyn Kelly this mega star by going after her.
Very interesting. Caitlin, what do we have?
This gentleman here, David, he has an opinion on Trump and talking about Megyn Kelly as well.
Well, I like I said earlier during the informal talk we had, I don't think I think Trump's whole excuse for not being there was completely ridiculous. However, I salute Trump for joining the campaign. I think he has brought up issues and thoughts that we haven't had in this country in a long time, and I think he is a good patriot. But let me tell you my concern too. Look at his past, his TV show, his business operations. Whenever he gets to the top and a problem occurs, he disappears.
Yeah.
Lets other people run things. And I'm scared to death that's what he's going to do in the White House.
Very interesting perspective on that. Any other candidate comments? Anybody strike you? Philip, looks like you're reaching your hand up.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. We talked about Trump just dribbling the ball out kind of at the end of a game. He just didn't want to slip up right at the end, and I think that the game's just starting now. Iowa's just beginning. There's so much ahead, so I think it was a mistake on his behalf, and he needs to look long-term, and by sitting out Iowa, I thought it was a mistake.
It's something that Roger said earlier exactly right, which is that, a week is a long time in presidential politics. Nobody really knows how this is going to evolve. But one thing you can rest assured, what goes on today is going to be different tomorrow or the next day.
Yep.
And it'll be fun to watch. As political observers, I think we can all agree this is a fascinating election season.
Absolutely.
Final comment from the audience.
2-minute warning, so.
One thing that caught me off guard was actually our audience here. When Rubio mentioned the name of Jesus, there were some gasps and where did that come from? I don't believe that our current president believes that there's anything out there that's going to hold him accountable for anything anytime soon. So I appreciate it whenever I hear Ted Cruz in his closing statement mention pray for this election. Okay, Marco Rubio mentioned the name of Jesus. I forgot what the context was. He went on to mention God himself. I think that it's important for us to have a candidate that, despite whatever religion it is, to feel that there is something out there beyond him that's going to hold him accountable for something.
And I just have to before we leave it, I can't leave it out there as one of the few Democrats out here. The man's a strong Christian and does believe in God and does believe in prayer. So I know that about him for sure.
Hey, that's going to wrap it up. This is going to be the final thought. I would like to have you give yourselves a round of applause again for being a phenomenal studio audience. Thank you very much, Don. Doug Elmas, Roger Salazar, thank you very much for being here. This is living proof that people with diverging points of view can still be friendly. You can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that sentiment is epitomized in this room. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening. And I'll be back with you tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock on KFBK. Be well.